In today's episode, Kevin asks, how do we standardize metrics and measurement across the organization, especially when different parts of the company do things differently? Different business units have their own style of doing stuff. This is a great and very common question, especially in larger companies and enterprises. The answer to this question is, well, unsurprisingly, it's going to be a framework. It's going to be a model for building a model, kind of a meta model, if you will. So let's look at this. In fact, let's bring this up here. This is the process for putting together an enterprise analytics system or standardization or framework or whatever you want to call it. It should look familiar, by the way, because this is also the model that we use for things like machine learning and for data systems and BI and all the technology that we want to deploy in a way that maximizes adoption and compliance. So let's go through this. For the first part is goal alignment. What goals are we trying to align our system with? What are the business goals that everything has to roll back up to? If we don't have that clearly defined and written out, nothing's going to work here because everyone's going to keep trying to address their own specific goals instead of the big picture goals. So we need to make sure that we have those goals documented and that we have the process for obtaining them documented, and frankly, the governance, who's in charge of these different goals, having that documented too, because if you don't have those stakeholders clearly mapped out, you're going to create something that nobody's going to want. So that is super important. That's why this comes first. Second is exploratory data analysis. Given that we understand the goals, what are all the systems that feed into those goals? And there's a little worksheet that I typically use that has the KPIs people normally measure with the business goals. Then you try and connect the dots to see how things get put together. But exploratory data analysis is super important. It requires statistics and data analytics tools. It may require some machine learning. It may not. But it requires you to take all the KPIs and the metrics that you've got and essentially do mass statistical analysis to figure out what of all this data that we collect actually has a mathematical relationship with the outcomes we care about. So very, very important. The third step is creating that framework. Once you have the math proven out, then you create a framework and say, okay, these are the things that are important. So on the marketing side, for example, very silly example, let's say that you've gone and connected to all your social and search and email and referral traffic and all that stuff, and it turns out that email sent on Thursdays plus tweets containing emoji are the thing. Great. Now you create a model for that, saying, okay, these are the things that we need to do, and when we validate the model, when we test it, we will want to prove that this is the case. And so what you go through and you document out all of the things that mathematically have a relationship, and that brings us to the next stage, which is validation. So now that we've got this model, now we test it. Now we say, okay, hey, social media manager, tweet more emoji and see what happens, right? Hey, email team, send 2 emails on Thursday instead of 1, or make sure you send an email every Thursday instead of every other Thursday, with the intent to prove causality. One of the biggest traps and the oldest traps in analytics is making the assumption that the correlation is causality. That's not the case. You have to prove it through the scientific method. That's what the validation stage is. Validation is essentially using the scientific method to rigorously prove that the data you've collected is causal in nature and can be translated as such. Once you've validated your measurement model, your metrics model, then you roll it out. That's where we get to deployment, and that means taking all the systems that you've engineered up to this point and transforming them into production systems. So taking them out of test environments, making sure that they are secure, which is a really big deal, making sure that they are idiot proof, I guess, but require the minimum amount of hand holding so that the system can scale up as fast as possible. And deployment can take a long time. Depending on how complex a system you've built, it can take months, possibly even years, because you need to do it right. You need to make sure that everybody who gets it can adopt it and work with it. The next stage is adoption. This is adoption of the system, which means training, which means development, which means compliance. Just like if you were rolling out a medication at a hospital, you'd want to make sure that your users were complying with it. They were actually using it. So making sure that you've got this framework in place, and that you're measuring, the next stage is measuring that compliance. What are people doing? Are people using the system? Are they not using the system? If that's not the case, then kind of going back to the beginning with that goal alignment, that governance process is when you identified all the people who have a stake in this thing. When you're at the adoption and measurement phases, you have to go back and check on those people and say, are you using the system? Why are you not using the system if you're not? What needs to be improved if you are using it? And what are the consequences of a failure to comply? So if there are people in the company who are just not doing the thing, even though they've received a directive from high on up, again, back to the goal alignment section. You've got that executive buy-in. You've established that, and so now when we get to the adoption phase, it's like you got to do the thing because everybody who signed on to this project said they were going to do the thing. So do the thing. If in the measurement phase you find that people are not doing the thing, they're not using the model, they're not using the systems or the software, that's when you go into the improvement phase. And the improvement phase doesn't necessarily mean improvement of the model. The improvement may be improving the people, improving the processes that the model needs in order to be functional. Because chances are, hopefully, you've worked out a good number of the bugs in the creation and validation stage. So the improvement may be improving the uptake of the model and its participation. There will, of course, be things like software changes, software updates. As technologies change, that improvement and refinement process is always ongoing. And then brings us full circle back to goal alignment. So you've deployed this thing, it's in place, it is proven, it is functional, people are using it. Great. Is it delivering the impact that you want? If not, we go back to goal alignment. Okay, was there something that got missed? Did the company's business change? Did technology change so substantially that all of the efforts to that point have been nullified? Again, that's a real risk when you're talking 2, 3, 4-year deployments for massive, massive systems. Ask anybody who's been through an ERP system deployment how much fun it is and how quickly it doesn't go. And you can see why this cycle has to be iterative and ongoing. If you want to kick it up a notch, if you can kick it up a notch because your company culture supports it, take a look at this model and then transform it with Agile, using Agile methodology instead of one big waterfall process. How do you do this in an iterative fashion that allows you to upgrade your standardization, upgrade your metrics, measurement, and model on a rapid, frequent basis? You need to have it in place first. You can't sort of iterate through the plane as you're trying to fly it, at least the first pass. But after that, how do you upgrade those efforts to using an Agile model if your company culture supports it? So, great question, common question, complex question. This is something that's going to take a very long time. It will not be something that is easy or overnight, even for the smallest companies, because, again, that exploration, that model creation, that model validation, using analytics, using data science, using machine learning, not something that is an overnight thing, despite our best wishes. So, great question. As always, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and the newsletter, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care. If you want help with your company's data and analytics, visit braintrustinsights.com today and let us know how we can help you.